All right, welcome back to the Soul Fresh podcast, where we slow the conversation down and talk substance over sound bites. Today, we're joined by LeMario Brown, Democratic candidate for Georgia Senate District 18.
Mario is a farmer, a small business owner, and a former Fort Valley City Council member and Mayor Pro Tem. He's someone who's worked at the local level and now says it's time to take those same community-focused solutions to the Georgia State Senate.
That's right. And District 18 covers much of Middle Georgia communities that are rural, working class, and often left out of the statewide conversations. Today's discussion isn't about slogans or party talking points. It's about policy. It's about priorities. And so now we welcome LeMario Brown to the Soul Fresh podcast. All right, LeMario, welcome to the Soul Fresh podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And so we want to just go ahead and start off just by letting the people understand a little bit about you. So if you could explain, how do we go from, or how did you get into farming, and how did farming lead into a life of politics?
Well, that's simple. My grandfather, as a matter of fact, both of my grandfathers, they farm. One actually did produce farming and the other one did livestock farming. So it was embedded in me from day one. I tried to run from it. I went to school for criminal justice. I'm a graduate of Fort Valley State University.
Okay.
But instead of going for ag, since we're traditional ag school, I actually wanted to fight, law. I wanted to go to law school and change some of the laws that I saw in the book at that point. So didn't have the money to afford it, to be honest. Found one of the, I ain't gonna say easier curriculums, but the step down from law school or political science would have been criminal justice. So I decided to go in criminal justice, and funny story, my intern ended up being at the Department of Ag, working in the Animal Protection Division. So it was just signs coming to me from God, like, hey, quit running from it. Farming is what you want, what you've been bred and born to do. We have the resources in our family. We have a 10-acre farm at my dad's property, and we had some other farmland that we partnered with other people from the other side of my grandparents. So, I couldn't run from it. It was one of those things that I always did. When I got off the school bus, me and my cousin, we joke about it now. He's retired military, but he would tell me, man, you remember granddaddy used to get us and make us pick up that big hair and put it on the back of the, I'm like, dude, I don't even know how we did that. But by the grace of God, man, we were able to, get off the bus from long day of school, had football practice, and he'll catch us just in time, like, hey, come help me get this hair on the track. Then we like, man, here we go again. But as of, as far as how I got to be a farmer, it wasn't pressure from my family. The family farm was actually, in pretty much a rest state. We still had produce growing at my father's farm. But as far as the livestock portion, I actually revitalized that part. I got my first pig, male and female, they started producing. Then we got into the goats, and they same thing, male and female. We started producing, and I decided recently, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, to get into cattle. Because cattle is one of those bigger livestock commodities that we love beef. A lot of people talk about that steak, that ground beef, and more recently, the oxtails. But when I was growing up, I never knew what that was, man. I was just collard green, neck bone, just straight country, So, but learning more about the actual, anatomy of the actual cow, so let me back up. My dad actually retired from Fort Valley State also. He worked in the meat processing division.
Okay.
So he was a man that worked with his hands too, and I got a chance to see that firsthand, how it looks to actually process a whole cow, process a pig, even the goats. Now, I'm gonna be honest, it'll gross you out, but once you get through the whole processing part to the part where they're actually cutting the meat down, oh man, you can see it. It's like, oh my God, that's how they actually get that good prime steak, because of the actual cuts from the butcher and the processing facility.
I seen the Netflix special.
Yeah. But it didn't turn me away from it. One thing that I'm gonna be honest, when I saw the whole process of chicken, that really turned me away from chicken for a while. Cause they literally walk in their, feces, and it's just one of those things that you really gotta be like equipped to handle to actually see the whole process. Like even from, like back in the day, you hear about the older women just grabbing the chicken and wringing their neck. Like that's a process. But as far as like keeping the pen clean, like going in and make sure they have bedding, like literally have to like deal with that, like that is a job, man. So I commend my grandmother for doing it for so many years because she never bought chickens out of the store. She would go out and grab one and, do her thing, do her processing,
Backbone.
So yeah, that's how I got in the ag, man. It was mainly just one of those resources that I kept overlooking, but just realizing what I already had in place, it was an easy shift from, this collegiate want to go do something bigger outside of Middle Georgia versus staying here and building what your grandparents already built and continue that legacy on.
And then when you got into ag, what was that moment that says, I want to shift that to politics?
Well, so this is one of my favorite stories. So my senior year in college, that's when Barack Obama was running, 2008. So I was already like tittering around with ag. I just finished my ag, my intern at the the Department of Ag. So I felt like, man, look, this is meant for you. So how do I change like the life around what I'm dealing with? Because that's usually how politicians start. If something's affecting them, that's how they usually get involved. Like, you know what? How do I change these laws? How do I change, even like the resources that we receive? Like, so that was one of the things I saw. As a black farmer, I saw the resources weren't really there for us as African American farmers. Just hearing about the pigment, the pigment farm, lawsuits back in the day, and some of these other lawsuits that black farmers had to really go and fight for, and they still getting discriminated against in 2026. It's one of those things like, man, come on, you got billions of dollars in this industry, but y'all want to cut us out to like little parcels of millions. Like we can't sustain like that. Like even with this new big beautiful bill that they keep talking about, when you divide that money up, even for the Caucasian farmers, we talk about bipartisanship. Like those guys are seeing about 6,000 or 7,000 per farmer. Like, and they got hundreds of acres. So that's not even a drop in the bucket when you're talking about the loss that they have lost from some of the policies that President Trump had put in place, that they can't really move their product outside of the United States like they want to. Like these tariffs, they're actually putting a strain on some of these farmers, these big farmers, and also the smaller farmers, because a lot of times we work with these bigger farmers. Like, so for instance, I have a 30-acre pecan grove. Now, I don't have the network to actually get all my nuts up and crack them and send them overseas and, do all the value added that goes in it. But there's a pecan house that is, and they have like shellers in the community. So when those guys take a hit too, we take hits as well. So it's all a trickle down effect, and once we get this blue and red out of the way and figure out we all men and women trying to survive, I think we'll be a better world.
Everybody's trying to place.
I like how you kind of ended right there. You know what I'm saying? Getting past all of the party nonsense and all that other kind of stuff. So very, very extensive background on farming, and I appreciate all of that. And you have a background in politics. You've already been in there. This is a pretty big jump, right? To state senate kind of seems, I'm not saying you're not equipped for it, but I'm saying most maybe state rep spot, something along those lines. Right. So the person who is now leaving, filled that spot with a lot of appointments as far as committees and things like that. And that kind of gave him power to do certain things. And that was a benefit to us, whether or not we received that benefit. Right. All right, to be said. But how do you see yourself being able, if you get this position, to fill that role, to be able to possibly get on some early committees? Or do you see yourself maybe getting with some younger freshmen, maybe senators? What do you think would be your best path towards trying to get some kind of stuff done within your first term?
Okay, good question. So when I win, I'll make sure the first thing I do, because we all know that in the House and the Senate, Democrats don't run things. The Republicans do. So if we want to get things done, we have to reach across the aisle and figure out, okay, what are you working on? What do you want that benefits your constituents? And I have to put forth what I'm working on that will be helping my constituents. My main purpose now is trying to lower the taxes, and even from sales taxes, property taxes, just small things that really affect us day to day. From my leadership and from municipalities, moving from the state, I really believe that gave me that groundwork. Because so funny thing, man, when I got on the city council, I was 26 years old. And they were African American, they were Caucasian, but they all were like 65 and older.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about diverse, and you're talking about just standoffish. Not just we don't want you here, but your ideas are a little like later on. And I'm like, no, we have a college down here, so we got to be creating legislation around like the people that we're serving.
Mhm.
So to answer your question. We're working on healthcare, and I think that's a bipartisan issue. So we have to figure out middle grounds where we can actually, I don't want to use the term horse trade, but trade where we can figure out what's beneficial for our people and what's beneficial for the Republicans and what their agenda is, but not selling our people at the same time.
So not to cut you off. So I hear bipartisanship. I think the bigger problem that I have when it comes to bipartisanship is we don't start in the middle.
Yes.
We normally start on the right, and then we compromise more and more.
Right.
So we always end up more to the right. So do you see bipartisanship as in you co-sponsoring something with somebody who might particularly have the same interests as you, because your constituents both might suffer from the same problems or something along those lines?
Yes.
Or do you think it's going to be more of a kind of like uphill battle? Because so legislative session just started yesterday, right? So we're in day 2, and we know last year crazy bills that were going through, and there's like a lot of repeat of that this year. So do you see yourself possibly being able to work with this group, or do you see it really being kind of difficult and not like making the job harder before you get there?
Well, to be honest, the unknown is always, scary.
Mm-hmm.
Being first time in the Senate, not really having a full grasp of, how we can meet in that middle ground, because it's always us against them.
That's true.
And unfortunately, we have, politicians that feel like, even on both sides, like, hey, I'm not going over there. I'm not going to talk to them. But that's killing your constituents when you have an agenda that you want to push too. Mm-hmm. So I agree. Sometimes we just need to come in the middle and just have a blank slate.
Yeah.
Not just saying, but see, I'm just gonna be real, man. Can I be real?
Be real.
That's the point coming on here, man.
So you've seen how Republicans work.
Right.
I have.
They're not too fond of me in the middle as an African American, 40-year-old African American. So we gotta have some unique carrot to dangle, and that unique carrot is gonna be agriculture.
Yes.
So my farmers, they don't look like you. They don't look like some old white guy. They look like young, moderate Americans, Georgians. So when I look at a farmer, I don't look at, the color, because we all have to put in sweat equity. Even the guys that have bigger farms, like, I talked to a guy. Now, I'm going to be honest. I had the wrong perception before I met him. I was like, man, this guy was giving everything. His dad just, let him get millions of dollars and this, that, and the other. But not having that opportunity to sit down and talk, before we did, I had a misconception of what his family actually went through to get to where they were today. So when we had that conversation, man, it was just like, he was telling me, I don't want to offend you, but, we work for everything. Sometimes we ran into black farmers that don't want to do the work. Mm-hmm. At first I was a little offended, but when we sat down and we walked around the farm, really like understood that, this soybean don't care who eat it, white or black. You know what I mean? And the only thing that this soybean cares about is the green. Is that's gonna take to pay for it. So when we met, like you said, find that middle ground, and that middle ground was when you produce these produce, they have to be sold. And what I had to get him to understand was, look, African American buy a lot of y'all produce. I mean, a lot of y'all product and produce. So you can't just be out here farming just for white people, because that don't make sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you're talking about some of the SNAP benefits, true enough, I've found out that African Americans are not the only ones that are just soaking up that funding. And I think
not even the most.
Not even the most.
And I was gonna say the Republican found out that most of their constituents was on welfare and was getting food stamps.
Yeah. Like
we was getting the short end of the pie, and you talking about a big slice of pie. They was just cutting us like a third of a third.
Right.
And that was, to be honest, that really ticked me off, man. And I was like, wait a minute. How are we still in a society where, they point the finger at us for, still getting sloppy seconds. Like our grandparents had to take the hog and like they made a delicacy of the chitlins.
Exactly.
I don't eat them, but like they really like made a thing out of that. And everything that they throw at us, and I mean like the hateful Republicans and Caucasian, we always taking it, and we turn it into something that can thrive and benefit our community.
Mm-hmm.
So, my first approach is definitely going to be trying to meet them in the middle.
Of course.
But if they don't want to meet, I'm not finna sell out my people, and I'm not finna go kiss ass just because they want us to pass certain legislation.
I hear that.
So
when we talking about, but I guess let's go ahead and say all farmers matter.
Mm-hmm. All farmers matter, yeah.
But when we focusing on Black farmers and we're talking about land loss,
Mm-hmm.
and when we think land loss, we typically think that's a federal issue.
Yeah.
So what authority does Georgia legislature actually have to support Black land loss and Black land retention?
Well, one thing I did notice, this was back when I got into politics from the city council standpoint. I realized the state of Georgia had a lot of land that they owned that was being undeveloped, that they didn't have any plans for. Hell, it was right next to my property. And, I'm like, wait a minute, why can't we get 10 acres of this? And we're producing produce for the state of Georgia. It's not like we taking it and just buried it in the ground or trying to ship it to some other like foreign country. We're actually planning on like growing these produce and raising these livestock and selling them right here in Georgia. And as a matter of fact, to give it even closer right here in our local community. So, my thing was, I'm trying to find that middle ground, how we can actually figure out a way, because I think that'll be a smart legislation. Like, for one, the state of Georgia is going to win, and the local commissioner, county commissioners, and the cities, they're going to benefit when you take this property that wasn't on the tax roll and you put it back on the tax roll. If you give a farmer opportunity like myself, maybe pilot programs, we can actually give 5 acres, not necessarily give it, but lease it to, small farmers and even small businesses, but we can look at, okay, let's see if this pilot program worked for Middle Georgia or specifically Fort Valley.
Right.
We know the people down there, they need more green leafy vegetables, they need more butter beans, they need more peas. They're even producing peaches there too. So a lot of those commodities can be like just really, man, I don't.
No, I hear what you're saying, because a lot of those commodities can translate into the communities where we're facing food deserts.
Yes, absolutely.
Which we've had those conversations.
Absolutely. Now, and that could be one of the selling points. So instead of us like just having it for one farmer to benefit, so we create this pilot program. Everything we grow on this pilot program, it goes to a less fortunate, maybe some of the housing authorities, maybe some of, like I said, the food banks, the food commodities. And even if you don't have one in your community, now it gives you the opportunity to create one. So like places like Roberta, where they just closed down the grocery stores over there, like that would be a perfect opportunity for us to say, you know what? Let's take this undeveloped land, these 10 acres that nothing but timber on it, and we have to be careful with that too, because a lot of the timber is being used to build new housing. And as you see, this subdivision I came in, it looks like a really new, subdivision, and it has to be built off of Georgia pine. Like we don't want, other states and other like countries to
prices jack up.
Yeah, because that's what we're dealing with now. Like the price of lumber now in Lowe's, man, it's crazy. From 5 to 10 years ago. So I really believe like not just the government coming in and just, pampering, anybody, black or white, Democrat or Republican, but we have to have that sense of responsibility to say, okay, these people have been paying taxes, even if it's not directly you, your parents and your grandparents, your forefathers, they paid into this system and they never got a return off of it. So we got to look at ways that we can start back, getting some of that economic development, some of that intentional wealth back into our community.
I know you got that one question. I wanted him to clarify something before you move on. If you could clarify something we didn't state, if you can just let the people know what District 18 actually is, and then
geographically. Okay.
As far as what you represent.
Okay. So District 18 would be Peach County, Crawford County, Upson County, Monroe County, parts of Macon-Bibb, and parts of Houston County.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, shouts out to Crawford County.
Yeah.
Right. I do some work out there. And I would be remiss if I didn't say shouts out to Miss Cassandra Harris, because she be holding it down.
That's
so
right.
shouts out to my favorite soldier out there. And I like how you talk about, the rural access and things like that. would say that when it comes to eminent domain, I do know that the Public Service Commission really has a large role in how stuff like that is handled. There is another 2 races this year that's going to happen for that, so people definitely need to be on the lookout for that. We're going to have to re-elect somebody who already won, and then there's going to be another race, whole stuff. Okay. But I say all that to say, if we are talking about food insecurity and things like that, you as a farmer, what kind of creative ways do you think that you could possibly put together in a policy that you think would be able to help communities that are suffering, like Crawford, like Taylor, like I believe, I can't remember who just lost another one not that long ago. They just lost to Piggly Wiggly as well. Right, so it's like
Oglethorpe.
Yeah, so it's consistently happening, like here in Middle Georgia and stuff like that. So with that being the space that you would occupy, what are some ways that you think would be creative enough to kind of help that could possibly, I don't know, not necessarily supersede the local government, but possibly bring funds in or some type of programs, initiatives, policies? What would that be?
Well, I was just on a call last night with the medical physicians of Middle Georgia. So one of the candidates on there, he bragged about us having a $14 billion surplus. So I say, let's start there. Let's take some of that surplus and incentivize guys like me and yourself, along with Cassandra Harris, to create businesses where we can actually be intentional about what we're doing. We're not hiding it. If we got $5 million we want to put in Crawford County, let's go. Let's sit down and talk with the local leaders. Let's figure out how we can create a policy that works for everybody, not just the farmers, but also the consumers too. Like when you're talking about creating those food banks or those grocery stores or small like farmer markets, we gotta like look at the infrastructure that it takes to actually to do it. We got to have like running water, because some people will start, they'll clean their vegetables right there on the spot to give it to a consumer. And, we got to make sure the water is fresh. We got to make sure we have electricity, so there's a lot of, I think, like moving parts that can make this one legislation make sense and it not just be, oh, we're just going to give Crawford County or, Mr. Jones and Mr. Brown, this whole, like $5 million just to open up a grocery store there. No, we have to like figure out ways that it's going to get their attention too, because electricity is one of those big, commodities that we don't think about. Fiber optics, those like, I guess things that we as African American don't think about.
Utilities.
Utilities, because like in the rural part, like Crawford County and where my farm is, we don't have internet access.
Right.
So when you're talking about having people come, to make payments, pulling up vouchers on their phone, or either, being able to print stuff, it's just, I think, small things like that and those details. Because if you ever look at a lot of those legislation, those resolutions and, those laws, the devil is in the detail, and it sounds good up here, like you're saying. We don't want to, have a great bill and figure out, we want to give this incentive to, this organization, and we find out that we got to give $10 million to whatever, like the National Rifle Association, just so we can pass this bill. So we got to be looking out and really like being intentional from top to bottom, because if we don't, you're gonna end up signing off on a bill that, you didn't even know that the devil was in that detail, and you're looking at the bigger picture, or the quote unquote bigger picture, because you're trying to help out a local community. I really feel like if we can make common sense legislation in small communities like that, I think the Republican and the Democrat, they're being affected the same. So it'll be a legislation I feel like we have to get the people behind. We got to make sure we're not shoving something down their throat. They may not want a grocery store in their community. So
right. There's definitely other, options and stuff like that. And even just like moving from, because I feel like now we're kind of like crossing political jurisdiction with state and local and stuff like that. So just moving strictly to state, you're in the Senate. I said, I think maybe off the camera when we were speaking, as I wouldn't say I'm a progressive, but I would say that I have a lot of progressive things that I wish would happen if we had a more progressive state legislature. So if I were to just ramble off a few things, would you give me kind of like your opinion on some of those things? So let's just say universal pre-K. How do you feel about trying to implement something along those lines?
And when you say universal, what do you mean?
Universal pre-K for all Georgia children at a certain age. Basically, if it was like a universal healthcare system within Georgia, it'd be the same thing for like a pre-K or a universal free lunch program.
So
things like that.
Are you saying like it's mandatory that they go, or is it optional? Because
I wouldn't necessarily say mandatory, but if it's accessible, then everybody would be able to do it.
Yeah,
so right. So it's not like we're right. It's more so trying to fill a gap or a need. Right. No. Now I wouldn't say like private schools now have to do a certain thing or nothing like that. But for public schools, which state senate would probably have more.
Absolutely. And I feel like we should find funding to make sure we support those programs.
Right.
You know, not just say, okay, here's the law and there's no money that come with it. I mean, that's one thing I noticed. A lot of bills that were being passed when I was on the city council, they would implement those bills and it would put strain on our local police department, our local public works department, and it never came with funding. You know, because our state seemed to look over places like Fort Valley. You know, even Warner Robins, like you guys do a lot because of your sales tax. You know, like hotel, motel, I don't even think you guys have that because like you do so good on like your property taxes and all these other taxes that's in the city. So we got to be really like careful how we frame that, you know, kind of legislation, you know, but I do believe we should definitely give everybody the opportunity.
Only reason I think I frame it that way is, one, you said earlier, with the surplus, let's start there. I think that's a great idea because a more happier, healthier, smarter community becomes a more productive community, which makes Georgia that much better, which brings in a lot more revenue. Absolutely. And then also, which I just go ahead and throw this out, if we're talking revenue generation, how do you feel about decriminalizing and then recreationally legalizing marijuana? Let's just throw it out there, man. As a farmer, you know what I'm saying?
I don't mean to take a stab, but you definitely didn't read my resume. Because that was one of the first legislation I passed in Fort Valley. We decriminalized marijuana.
Yeah, I did not see that level. That did not come up.
And believe it or not,
I missed that.
We actually we fought about it in work session, committee. So the lovely thing about it, I was over public safety at the time.
Okay.
So it had to come out of my committee. I had the authority to bring it out of the committee. But we worked very hard with the chief of police on campus, because we have that, you know, that big campus out there. And believe it or not, those kids were losing their scholarship because like small amounts of marijuana. And I'm like, come on now.
Yeah.
Right.
Y'all charging us almost 60, 70, 80 grand to go to this school, but we getting kicked out because we getting found with little pieces of marijuana. But your scientists, they're over there testing marijuana in the agriculture department. So that's like like contradicting itself. You know, and I realize Georgia has been doing a lot of that, because it's like I don't think these guys really read the legislation. And I've noticed most of everything they sign off on is coming from lobbyists. It's coming from some other like study group telling them, hey, this is what we need to do, versus them creating like legislation that really makes sense for the people, you know, and that's been disheartening, man. So that was one of the reasons why I felt like, you know, I gotta run. You know, five Republicans, you know, anybody else was like, they told me like, man, you must be out your mind to go up against 5 Republicans. I would say, look, this is the best test. If it's meant for me, God gonna make a way for me. Yeah. And he's definitely been making a way. And I feel the ancestors pushing me, man. Like, and I'm not just saying it in a joking manner, because, you know, just to give you a little bit more about me, we run a very successful construction company. You know, we do a lot of project management. We do a lot of work with municipalities, a lot of work with housing authorities. So, you know, getting into politics, you know, it wasn't something that I just thought was this big, shiny, like, thing to do.
Right.
It was an obligation. You know, looking in my friends' eyes and looking at my parents, even my parents, I'm like, man, my mom complaining about having to pay for high-ass prescriptions because she can't afford it. And I'm like, Mom, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. But, you know, I was thinking from the sense of a son, let me financially take care of that, not looking at it from the policy standpoint. Like, we have, again, I'm going to go back to this $14 billion in surplus. Ain't nowhere in the world me and you should be pulling money out of our pockets trying to pay for our parents' prescription, because they work in this community. They lived in this world. They put money into this society and this system, and they're not getting a return off of it. So it's time out for us to be investing in a dead system that's not giving us a return on our investment.
Did you have another one that you want to throw at them?
No, you good.
So let's go back to something you mentioned about broadband, which is crazy that, you know, it's still uneven. Like, so do you have a vision to kind of break or push that digital divide?
Well, yes, because my home community, like we have our own utility system there.
Do you think, real quick, and add on to that, and not to cut you off, do you think it should be a utility?
Well, I feel like from the logistics standpoint, it has to be a utility. Not a utility that I feel like that should be tacked onto your bill.
Right.
But as far as the service part of it, it definitely has to be a utility, that's being serviced by the guys that's qualified or the young ladies that's qualified to do the work versus, us just, I guess, trying to pull it out of thin air and say, hey, you got internet. No, we got to have serviceable, like substations and like different other municipalities that we can partner with. Like Fort Valley should be able to partner with Marshallville, Montezuma, Roberta, Reynolds, and because we do it with gas and water now. We service Montezuma for water. We service like Roberta gas. And I'm like, fiber optics has to be an option for them too, but not at the sense that we're actually robbing that community of actually something that I feel like is a natural resource.
Kind of like a co-op.
Yeah, definitely like
the EMC.
Well, if not a co-op, make it where the people from the community can benefit from it.
Okay.
Now, that's one thing I noticed when I started doing research on our utility commission in Fort Valley. There were a lot of money being put to the side for rainy day stuff. And I just feel like if we can like crack the piggy bank just a little bit, what I mean? Little bit of resources pour over into the communities that really need it. Because it's like you have like dried up places and people like literally like losing their houses because they can't pay for the either taxes, they can't pay for like the upgrade to keep like with the utility system, either the water pipes are damaged. Like there are issues that I feel like residents are having right here in our community that, again, 14 million, $14 billion surplus. I saw a surplus of maybe 10 million, all utilities. And I'm like, I wonder what they plan on doing with that. And the answers were, well, we got to put it up for, this, that, and the other. Some of the stuff I can't really, talk about here because it does like play into a part of the system that keep the system actually going if the city or the county or anything just completely just go away. So I get that. But at the same time, if you don't have any people, how you going to provide the service anyway? So you got to take care of the people that's putting into the system. Gotcha. And then we can actually, again, I go back to getting a return on our investment.
I want to go back to something you said initially that got you, I guess, into school or while you were going to school, criminal justice reform. You said there were laws that you didn't like that you wanted to do something about.
Well, marijuana was one of them. Hey, just being honest.
My God. But
I mean, not just to settle on that one. I mean, when I was in the, I had to be 11th grade, and this was silly on me, because I didn't know any better. But it fired me up though, because he didn't know what he was doing. He was birthing that fire way back then. But I was in Burger King. I had like this jacket that I bought out of the mall and it had police on the back. And these two white cops walked up to me and he was like, "What you doing with that on?" Not, "Hey, how you doing? What's your name?" He was like, "What you doing with that jacket on?" I'm like, and young, arrogant, like hothead. I'm the baby of three brothers, so I'm like, my brother gonna come. So I'm like, dude, I just bought this out of the mall, the Galleria Mall. Well, you can't wear that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't wear it? I paid for it. Like, how does that make sense? But like, I really feel like that's what gave me the fire to really like want to go in law school and just seeing like guys being snatched out of the car for like, I don't even know if they had weed or they were drunk or whatever the issue is. Or they was just like you're saying, DWB, driving while black. Yeah. You know what I mean? And not to put any, fault to any Caucasian officers, because I know they put their life on the line for us every day too.
But we're talking systemic versus individual.
Systemic. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not trying to isolate them because I have great officers that I work with that don't look like me, and they've done great things for the community. But we're talking about, when you turn on the TV, you see another one of them shooting one of us it's open day for hunting season. Yeah. And we got to stop that, man.
And four brothers should be able to just ride in their car without everybody having to get out.
Absolutely.
Even if you do get pulled over.
Absolutely.
Like, why you got all of us out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the craziest things that I feel like Georgia, we got to do a better job of protecting our officers, but also protecting the individuals that's riding on the road every day. It's not just the officers that need to get home. It's your son, he need to get home. Our kids, they got to get back home to us, because if not, we feel like we didn't do our job. And it's not your responsibility to while they're on the street, it's the police responsibility because that's what you pay taxes for.
Exactly.
You pay taxes for them to protect and serve, and they got to continue to do a better job of that, especially in some of these rural parts of Georgia, that we don't even know what's going on because of fiber optics. They don't have internet to be able to upload like issues that that just took place at the local Dairy Queen or the local apartment complex. Like some of these officers, man, they know that they can go in and play with these cameras and, twist the story around. If I was doing this, then I have the right to shoot. But sometimes you got to stop looking at what they got black and white and what's in your heart.
Right.
God didn't intend for you to come out here and shoot nobody just because they look a certain color. Or even if they getting outraged or they may have drugs in the car. I don't feel like they need to get shot just because they have a pound of weed in the car. We got a judicial system that deals with that. Not for you to come in and play God and say, okay, you ain't nothing. I'm just gonna shoot you. You know what I mean? Like, and I tell you, man, the first story that really kind of touched me was when Trayvon Martin had to go through what he had to. Man, that brother, he didn't know what he was gonna get himself into that night. Because I'm sure if he did, he would have stayed where he was and not been down here fooling with these crazy people down in Florida, man. And they made a mockery of that, man. Like, you had this guy selling the damn gun. You had, like, all kinds of, like, other stuff that he was just selling and making money off of. And I'm like, this the world we living in?
Yeah.
Like, it just really, like turned me off from just, for a certain period of time, like, white people just was not on my favorite, on the favorite side of my list.
You become famous because you killed a young black boy.
Yeah, now that don't make sense. That don't make sense. And looking at his parents having to go through that, man, it was just one of those things that, I just felt like I didn't have a child then, but I knew me as a child, that would tear my mom apart, man. I went to Florida to hang out with my cousins or something, and here I am coming back in a body bag.
Right.
All over misunderstanding. Yeah. So I really feel like we got to stop like putting these walls up, as far as like Republican, because we as the Democrat and black people, we're the most opening and welcoming people that I've seen in my life. Because we look just like with the whole Dylan Roof situation. I mean, they were able to sit there and let this man walk in the church and sit there and have a word about God. And he still decided to kill him, man.
Because that's how we move.
Yeah.
We welcome him.
I just don't understand that, man.
And
and I hope I don't lose no votes for that, but that's just how I feel, man. Like my uncle, it ain't gonna tell him what church because I don't want them to get mad. But he have his on his side.
Right.
And he was like,
most
look, nephew.
Most do now.
He like, look, nephew, you good, you come here.
That kind of started the movement. When most churches started having at least some type of dedicated security or people just started coming to church packing.
Yeah.
And so, but I think like something that you were saying is what we all need to get back to, especially when it becomes to local, state, and just in politics in general. We got to get back to some type of humanity.
Yes, that's right.
The society, this world is like losing its humanity.
Yeah, that's right. But one thing we have to realize, slavery went too long ago. And we got to figure out a way to keep breaking those barriers. Like, look, we got some of the smartest, most educated, from heart surgeons, brain surgeons, presidents, lawyers, doctors, just billionaires, just being creative and being entrepreneurs to the point where, man, we're still, like I said, we're still getting shot down in the street like it's open season. And we got to figure out a way, whether it's fighting back or whether we just got to figure out a way we can just create our own country, but we cannot continue to live the way we're living in the United States. And especially in Georgia, because there's places in Georgia now, again, that young men are scared to walk down the street because they scared of the police, not what they call the hood. I mean, they feel comfortable there. They scared of a guy walking in a uniform versus the guy that's sitting on the side of the street that they call a troublemaker. That's one of our, honestly, maybe one of our family members.
Yeah.
But when, and this goes to the police in our own community, I feel like we have to get to the point where we can actually have programs where people are policing their own community. And I'm sure Caucasian people probably feel the same way. They don't want to see this big, African-American guy coming in and just manhandling them. Like, and that's fine. Like, but in our community too, we don't need you guys coming in here 7 deep for like one issue when it was just a domestic problem. Like, come on.
My
like,
brother, talking Black Panthers now.
Yeah.
He done went straight to self-unarmed defense. I'm like, hey, okay, let's get it.
but at the same time, man, we got to stop being scared.
I understand. Exactly.
Because if not, we're gonna continue to birth that fear in our next generation. Not saying we just gonna go out and just start killing people, but we gonna start standing up for ourselves. And it's time out for that.
Tactical and strategic and not being reckless. And I agree.
Exactly.
And I appreciate you having just not, I don't want to say the gall, but just believing in yourself enough as a candidate to say what needs to be said, right?
Absolutely.
Not shying away from those things.
Absolutely.
I feel very represented with what you just said because there's not a lot of candidates that are going to come on here and say that. So I do appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
And just jumping back to criminal justice reform, I want to kind of stay a little on that. We talked a little bit about police. We talked about the culture, about relationships with Black community and police. So unions aren't really that big here in Georgia. There's a lot of things that try to stifle them. I'm very pro-union until it comes to police unions, because I believe that they kind of manipulate and they abuse the way that they're set up and stuff like that. So Georgia doesn't have that issue, but they do have the Atlanta Police Foundation. So there's a lot of intermixing of private and public funds that allow the police officers to do what they kind of do. Okay. So the Stop Cop City movement was around a lot of that and stuff like that. State Senate, you would possibly have the ability to create legislation that would stop certain things like that. Not saying or putting you on the spot like that, but do you feel like that's possibly something you would be interested in maybe looking at in a criminal justice reform? Like how do I make it to where the police officers don't have as much authority to do what they do, so that maybe now people feel a little bit more safer in approaching and stuff like that? Like what would, I guess, that kind of be for you? Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. You know, I have a brother that served, he worked with the Peach County Sheriff Department for 20 plus years. So, and he understands, there's both sides to the coin.
Right.
You know, but at the same time, we have to be, knowledgeable and intentional about the legislation that we're passing. And we don't create these super PACs, like you said, that create this kind of autonomy that they feel like they're above the law. And that's one thing that I'm not going to tolerate, Black or white. Nobody's above the law, but it has to be a fair law. Now, if the law don't make sense, then, that's what laws are made for, to be changed, sometime broken for a better tomorrow.
That's an even better point, because you're right. There is a difference between what's legal and what's right.
That's right.
Right? Like slavery was legal. Didn't make it right. So I definitely agree that sometimes we got to be a little bit, we got to look more into the nuance of what we're trying to make happen. And, what is the goal? What is the vision and stuff like that?
Right. And again, I don't want this message to be like turned into, oh, he's just going to go out and just try to go at all these white people or these white cops. No. I mean, I understand that their wives, their daughters, their sons, they want them to come home just as much as ours do. But they're going home at 100% rate versus us. We're going home at a very, very smaller rate. You know what I mean? So we got to be like intentional and at least cognizant about these things, not just, oh man, we feel sorry that, our brother got killed again. No. We gotta hold our elected officials accountable, whether it's the local, state, or federal, because a lot of times those guys, they get off the hook because these officers are allowed to do what they're doing because you passed the law. Like, didn't nobody else do that? The police chief, he was there, like courting you and probably then put some money in their pocket too. But you the one passed the law, and you're the one gonna have to deal with it. So I feel like when I pass a piece of legislation and my name is on it, I'm going to stand behind that, regardless of what it is. I'm going to have an explanation. It ain't going to be we all just decided to do it. No, if we did it, it all going to make sense so we can go back and explain and articulate it to our constituents, because a lot of times these laws come out and it's just a new law. Nobody is really like sitting down and saying, hey, just like this new law about DUI, or either driving buzz is a felony now. I'm like, come on. Like, we all know. And I'm just being straight up. Like, we know we targeted. But I told one of my fellow, like, colleagues, like, they must don't realize that they kids drive drunk more than we do.
Yeah.
So that's like, that's when you know that they're out of touch of even their own constituents in their own, like, their own family. Because I mean, we don't want anybody driving drunk and getting into a car wreck and, killing anybody.
Not at all.
I get that part. But sometimes we can be a little too, like, I guess, like foot on your back or your neck, when it comes to law enforcement. And that's not the way you govern a city or even a country by trying to strong arm somebody. You got to figure out ways that, get us involved. Like, figure out ways we can actually create more businesses like Uber, drive ride shares, where people don't have to drive drunk when they go out, having a good time, celebrating things, because it's all just one mistake from being in jail or either being in the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to be proactive, not reactive, because I feel like that was a reactive law that they passed. Like, what policies have you put in place to stop it from getting to this point? So
I like that a lot, because you're actually talking about a solution to help curb the drunk driving versus what the state does now with this rolling thunder nonsense, right? They'll say that one weekend of just a whole bunch of ticketing is going to stop people from doing recklessness. But what you're saying is, like, if we're actively looking at the root cause of why they're doing that, and then you're saying we could put funds towards something. So even a statewide rideshare type thing that is publicly funded and is proportional to the representation of how many people are in each county or each city or whatever. Now you're not going to stop drunk driving, completely, but you can demonstrably, drop that number, and that's dope.
But this is the funny part about it. Like, how do you create a law that's just that cynical when you create liquor stores in our community? You allow liquor stores to pop up like they schools now.
Like
we had to put a stop on it. We put a 6 month. Warner Robins put a 6 month stop. Like, all right,
on liquor stores and big shops.
Yeah, man. And like I said, I was talking to Mayor Patrick about it, and I was like, that was a good move, but I don't know how long you're gonna be able to hold it, because it was just kind of like one of those, okay, we're gonna stop it for a little bit. But, even now, that's what I plan to do. Meet with these local officials and figure out how can we create laws that make it easier on them. Because when you think about it, man, come on. You know how many DUIs you get, like, probably in Warner Robins and just in Peach County alone? Man, we don't even have enough jail cells to hold everybody. And you talking about putting felonies on these people, man?
They're at capacity now.
Yeah, I know Peach County is.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, are we going to create more prisons, or are we going to create more programs to keep people out of prison?
I think we know the answer, but I wish we would.
Well, my goal is to create more programs, to keep us out of prison. And then when I say us, I mean just people as a whole. White, black, Hispanic, no matter what you is. Like, I don't feel like nobody should go to jail, man. I went one time, and I don't never want to go again. It was an eye opener. But I said, this is definitely not a place that no man or woman should be. Because it's not conducive for you to learn and grow and thrive. It's conducive for you to sit there and literally go crazy. And work for the state for a minimum, well below minimum wages.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's fair.
So we're getting closer to the end, and I just want to ask a quick question, if you could follow this sentence or finish this sentence. Georgia works best when?
Georgia works best
When?
Now I can give you the pretty answer: when we all work together.
Yeah.
But the real truth that I want to give you today is when Republicans stop around and really create legislation that work for the people all over Georgia, not just serving one set of people and just being naive to the fact that we have these problems going on in poverty-stricken communities. Housing is an issue. Mental health is an issue. Keeping these hospitals closed. In Fort Valley, we had a hospital closed when I was, I think, like 21 years old.
Yeah.
And, lucky, we have the resource to drive to the next city, but there's a lot of people, man, that literally died because they didn't have the access to healthcare.
And they pushed that one way out.
Absolutely.
Which affected the people deep in Fort Valley.
Yep.
Like my votes from Gano.
From Gano, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Now Camp John Hope Road.
Yeah.
Out there, man, look, if I were to fall on the farm today, they gonna either figure out where I'm going to Perry or to Byron. But while they trying to figure that out, I'm still bleeding out. And I'm like, man, having that medical facility in Fort Valley, I mean, it wasn't making a lot of money, but at the same time, we gave the people, the security of. But so, not to switch gears, but I got to switch gears before we end. Yeah. Do you know jobs and these big corporations don't come to your community if you don't have a hospital? because that's a liability. They don't have the resources to get their workers to a facility if something happens. So they go to the next city.
I didn't think about that.
You know, that's one of the biggest issues that we had as far as economic development, education, and not having sufficient healthcare access for the residents.
That's a good ride too, because either you got to choose whether you gonna tear down the 341 or that long ride down 49. Then you got to go down that long ride 247 connector.
Yeah, man. So you know, it's one of those things, man. Well, I know we have to be, you know, intentional about the things we're doing, not just rubber stamping stuff. Because you know, the leader of the house said it, or the governor said it, or you know, this guy that donated $1 million to my campaign said it. No, we got to be like intentional about everything we're doing, about everything we're saying, because if not, the next generation, they're going to be left, you know, in the dark, man. They ain't going to understand. Kind of like where we are now. And our ancestors didn't have the leverage to do this as freely as we do. And that's why I feel like we have to do more of this. We have to like you said, just let's just have real talk. Let's take out all the catch lines and all the campaign spills and all this other stuff that they done prepped me for to get here. But let's talk real talk. Let's let the people hear you talk about what you're gonna do. So when I get in Senate, they're gonna be like, hey, you said this on the Soul Fresh show. Like, what's going on?
Right.
No, I want you guys to hold me accountable.
Okay. Yeah. And we actually talked about that as far as when people get elected, there should be like a quarterly accountability meeting. You know, inviting candidates to come back to say, hey, you know, let's go over what you've done based on what you said, and let's see if we can hold you accountable.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm 100% with that. And I think the average voter is under the impression that after campaign season and after you get, you know, voted in, it's all right, job's done. But then once you go, you know, into session, that's when things really start happening. And there's a lot of stuff that'll happen in those 40 days, you know, for session and things like that. But to have somebody who's willing to put their face out there, talk to the people, is like, look, I voted for this. You guys might not have seen this part of the bill, so this is why. That's all I think most people want. They want to know, all right, if you didn't vote the way that I was thinking you were, well, why didn't you? And if you have a legitimate reason, most people that voted for you can hold their head on that. And I think that's where we would want our public servants to be.
That's right.
You know, less politicians, more people that's like, look, I believe in my constituents. They sent me here specifically to do a job. And if I can't do that job, then I'm not doing that. And that's what I'm hearing from you is you believe that your constituents should be first. And you're raised on this background of duty and you know, obligation and fulfillment and whatever you've done, it seems like you've excelled at. So I believe if you are given the shot, which I hope so, I don't want to show any kind of bias or anything like that.
You have to. I need your vote.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But I do believe that if given the opportunity that you'll serve well. And I appreciate you just being as candid as you have been. I know there's going to be certain parts of this podcast that people might not have expected to hear on, you know, from you, but you standing on it, you holding, I almost said holding your nuts on it, but you know, doing what you do.
I like that.
Yeah, you know, that's admirable.
I mean, because man, look, at the end of the day, I'm only a product of my environment. So if I go up there and try to be something I'm not,
right?
My mama gonna snatch me. She's like, hey baby, let me explain something to you. And my mama, she the nicest person you'll meet. They raised 3 boys. You know, we grew up in a single wide trailer. You know, we actually struggle. But my mom, she graduated from college. You know, my dad, they both retired, you know, from Fort Valley. They both retired from Fort Valley State University. So, I mean, just looking back on their lives and how they had to deal with all the stigmas and all the pressure that was going on back, you know, when they were raising us back in like the 80s, you know, like drugs hit our community like real hard, you know, and it affected all of us, you know, from people that's doing great now or ones that still, you know, dealing with those issues. So I feel like, man, you know, I don't have a choice but to go up and represent my people. You know, because, I mean, I can stay home, you know, so if I'm not, then give somebody else a shot. So I feel like this is a great opportunity to have somebody that really represents the common man in District 18. You know, look, when the gas prices go up, I don't read about it on the dang phone. Like I'm literally sitting here like, well, dang, do I put 50 or 40 or 20? You know what I mean? Or, and look, my son needs some food. You know what I mean? I got to pay the light bill. I got to pay the mortgage. I got to pay insurance premium. I got to pay taxes for my business. So we're talking about somebody that really feels everything that you guys feel. And I ain't just talking about it. I'm living it. I'm living it right here, right now.
All right. So you kind of pretty much just answered this last question. And which I was going to say, that's your camera right there. And if you would just tell the people, what's one thing you want the voters to know in District 18 to know about you and what to expect that you haven't like stated on the campaign trail or that they can't find in a little pamphlet? So if you could just tell the people one thing that they don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be honest. All my people know, and the ones that's going to get out and vote, you know who I am. You know what I represent. You know where I come from. And you know you got a strong stand-up guy when you send me up to the state legislature. Now, what I want the other voters to think about, do you want 2 or 4 more years of the consistent, like, just BS rhetoric that we've been dealing with, you know, throughout our state legislators, you know, creating laws that don't really affect us or really help us? I mean, they affect us, but they affect us negatively. So I want you to know you have someone that's going to read, that's going to listen, and that will definitely seek the understanding of what we're passing and what we're implementing and pretty much like imposing on every community within District 18. So a vote for Brown is a vote for someone that's going to definitely get down with you and we're going to roll the sleeves up and we're going to fight. You know, because I want to stay in the middle, but hey, if they don't want to play fair, you're going to see. They're going to be like, Brown don't play. So vote for Brown, January 18th. I promise you, I won't let you down.
All right.
Let's go.
Hey, I had fun on this one.
Yes, sir.
I did.
I enjoyed it,
man. Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Hey, no problem, man. Yeah, so you heard it here. LeMario Brown running for Georgia State Senate, District 18. Like I say, it was an awesome podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get something out of it. And like as always, stay so fresh. I'm your host, BK.
Jokes to Babe.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Peace.